This is an active cemetery. Please respect it as such. I begin my tour next to a garbage can to solve most problems, so please. There's about 5 to 7 active full-blown funerals that take, I'm sorry, 5 to 7 dozen funerals that take place here a year, so please respect it like the active cemetery it is. That being said, let's start from the get-go, because the sir is already one step ahead of me. I'm going to ask the question that he just asked again. Why? And you're right. It is because of the water. Any town that goes through extra trouble getting rid of the dead bodies, it's not because they want to, it's because they have to. In our case, it does have to do with the water, but not the weather. Not the river, not Lake Pontchartrain 6.5 miles that way, and not the Gulf of Mexico 99 miles that way from Canal Street. We have more water directly beneath us. Between 27 to 33 feet below you is a moving water table somewhere in the city of New Orleans, always has been, always will be, and there's not a single thing we could do about it. That's why if you're not from the Gulf area, chances are your homes have attached to them an extra room that we'll never even understand. I believe you call it the basement. Historically, you don't build too many basements in the swamp area, go figure. The big exception, of course, are the modern buildings going up in the central business district, steel frame construction, or miracle workers. But to this day, about 80 to 90% of this town is single to two-story wood frame houses set on top of piers and whose designs are about 200 years old. If you put a little basement underneath any of these houses, eventually the water table will move into your neighborhood, fill in that basement, become the world's filthiest swimming pool. That's how we discovered a form of hepatitis. I'm not joking. And don't worry about any of that stuff, because the real problem is within the year we'll suck in and destroy the rest of your property anyway. That's the exact same story appears in the Times-Picayune newspaper once every 3 to 7 years, proving once again that if you're going to take on Mother Nature, don't do it on her home turf, you're going to lose. The Cajun joke really says it all. Bury him in the morning around here, rains that afternoon, you're going to see the dearly departed one last time that evening. It's the only Cajun physics joke you'll ever hear. When the body is driven out of the ground by the water, it comes floating down Royal Street. And welcome to the town that historically has learned most of its lessons the hard way. I wouldn't be surprised if that's what happened to old Uncle Boudreaux before we figured out an easier and classier way of doing things. The way the official story through the Archdiocese goes, an unnamed Frenchman, doesn't even get credit for this, folks, is sent on business on behalf of the Archdiocese to the Caribbean. There he meets with the Spanish, another group of Catholics in the Caribbean, another area for different reasons. Their ground's no good for burying the dead the way we Catholics prefer. The Spanish were there a couple hundred years, they had to figure something out, and they did. And then our French ancestors went through and stole the idea. That's plain and simple what happened. The next paragraph in the exact book I'm quoting from says, we never give the Spanish official credit for where we get this idea from, which is terribly ironic considering I had to show my ID and my driver's license to 3 different nuns before they let me read the book I'm talking about, so I don't know how much more official it can get. Each of these tubes have 2 separate jobs, and the English name says it all. In English, they're known as vault ovens. Say it slowly, and you probably figure out most of it. As vaults, they are deceptively secure. This has the weak spot, and it's still a layer of brick behind that piece of marble. And all the other sides are 3 to 5 layers of brick, so it's literally bulletproof. More impressive is how well this survives during the flooding of Katrina. Now remember, that's not during the storm, that's right after. The storm goes north, west, sits on Lake Pontchartrain for 12 hours after leaving our town. Overloads that lake, the levees there fail, and that's when the flood begins. After the storm is over, that's why it's a man-made disaster. 6.5 square miles of our city is underwater, and it all washes up to the highest natural elevation, where you guys jumped on the buggy. That's why the French built there. At Jackson Square, we get 4 to 6 inches of water for 4 hours. I know, I measured it myself, and I still have the ruler marked and nailed onto the wall in my living room. 4 hours later, it recedes to where we're standing now. See my fingertip? Generously add about another foot. 6 to 8 feet of water are here for 2 months' time. And to make it worse, this is Basin Street. The actual birthplace of jazz is right here, but also it's named after the water basin that used to be here. A natural body of water that wants to flow in that direction, that's what happened. Debris in that water now bashes into our cemeteries, into our vehicles, into our buildings, just adding to the flood damage. All that's the bad news. Here's the good news. All the structures that were here before Katrina survived post-Katrina. Albeit some with a lot of damage, but they all survived.
Wow.
And more important than that, you don't think there's more important? More important than that, all the residences inside stay unmolested throughout the event. Let's just say, without getting into some really gross stories, there's at least 2 cemeteries 6.5 miles that way, another one 9 miles that way that don't do nearly as well as this cemetery in this particular situation. So we're really proud of this one.
Ooh.
Why? Because of the construction practices here?
Because it was built right, yes, sir. The fact that you're across the street from a police station only enhances that quality. As far as an oven goes, you see those 3 tombs there that need a little help? When you break it down to basic materials, you find out how the oven effect works. And if you want to build one of these around in your backyard, this is what you need. Brick, mortar, and this outside layer is limestone. That's it. I know it sounds super simple, but they thought this out. Limestone has a natural ability to suck away humidity and moisture from the inside of a structure. Sometimes it looks like it's bleeding or sweating. Kinda. It's pushing moisture through solid rock, making the inside of this box the driest thing in the city of New Orleans. And keep in mind, it's never the heat or cold that gets you in this town, it's the humidity. Unless, of course, it actually gets you, and then ironically, your final resting place will be bone dry. Can't make this stuff up, folks. In addition, the secondary job, combination magnifying glass and sponge when it comes to the heat of the sun. Now today is not a great example. On days with higher temperatures and lower overcast, heat goes in the morning, takes a long time to build up because of how well it's insulated, but by the end of the day, on heat wave days, it could get 2 to 3 times as hot in here for the last couple of hours as it was out here all day long. Translation, we go through a day-long 90-degree heat wave in there for the last 2 or 3 hours of the day, 180, 270 degrees. Moisture still being extracted out the entire time. Multiply it by the minimum of a year in the day's time. Catholic tradition that comes from a Jewish tradition, actually. And any dead biological matter locked inside degenerates down to dust. The human dead body, its clothing, the untreated pine casket, all down to dust. That's natural cremation. Why not conventional cremation? Because we're Catholic. And until the mid-'80s, we didn't believe that we could put a body on fire after death without a special letter from the Pope for every individual body we want to set on fire. Now keep in mind, this is the oldest road-ground cemetery in North America, oldest one in this area. It's only 4 blocks big, but this little tiny cemetery recycles. So we have about 100,000 dead people in here plus. And if we had to wait for a special letter from Rome before we could do anything with dead bodies, this tour would instead have to be some sort of theoretical indoor warehouse with 300-year-old mummies stacked to the ceiling, each wearing a toe tag. And that I recently found out is another local invention. We give you the toe tag. You can eat all you want. One day we'll hang some local culture.
Does it have to be buried in a wood casket, or can it be buried in a...
Have to is not a word that you know in the world of funerary rites in New Orleans. You could do almost anything you want. On the other hand, there's necessity based on the actual tomb. For example, some of them aren't wide enough to fit a conventional casket. At the same time, conventional caskets do something really weird. So does embalmment. It preserves the body before you bury it. They say it's for disease and for what do you call it, hygienic reasons. There really is no reason to do that. And you live in this town long enough, you find out. You don't have to get cremated. You don't have to be embalmed. You don't have to be in a casket. You just have to get in the hole. There you go.
Get the hole, baby.
Them, they keep
Oh, I'm not up to that part yet, sir.
I was wanting all that too, so that's not Mr. Vincent. Or
There are 3, no,
more.
he is. Yeah, he is. She is, I'm sorry. There are 3 different ways of getting into the cemetery. This will cover your question. The easiest and cheapest way of getting here is right behind you, or here to your left. The shelves, the tiers, the rentals, or the motel for the dead. Giving you a lot of details before I start the story. These are not meant to be permanent, and the shelves in any cemetery in this town are owned by the owners of the cemetery, not individually. In this case, it's the Catholic Church, and this is one of the most expensive in town because it's so lucrative to get in here. It's just the oldest. It's very Catholic.
If you don't have the money,
All you have to do is get on the waiting list. If you get on if the waiting list, they call you up. In the meantime, you can refrigerate stuff if you need to. When you're called in, at a low economical price of around $3,500 the first year and about $1,000 a year every year after that, you can put the dearly departed into one of our shelves.
it is rent.
Oh yeah. Keep in mind that $1,000 a year, every year, on time, every year. It is tax deductible. It is for maintenance, but if you don't pay, they mail you a letter that says 2 things. Number 1, remember when you wired in, there was that waiting list. And number 2, just like that cool apartment you may have had during college, can't pay for it on time, they gladly kick you out in favor of someone who can. And that's when the next guy comes in. It's now the caretaker's job, that's the big guy up front with the notebook, to take down the decorative piece of marble. Behind each of these is a layer of brick. Behind the young lady over here, you can see for yourself, and a 12-pound sledgehammer will get you through there, but don't be too rough because you have to reuse the same brick. Step 3 is everyone's favorite. Now he trades in a sledgehammer for a dustpan and broom. and proceeds to crawl inside. Working his way all the way to the back, from what I understand, we degenerate down to a very fine dust that likes to cake into the corners. You have to scoop all that stuff out, pour it into a bag, crawl backwards out, find the senior member of the family, hand you the bag of ashes, and while, quote, holding the bag, you make the following decision. A, keep that bag of ashes, make it yours, put it in an urn on the mantelpiece, throw it in the Mississippi River, whatever the last wishes could have been. Or more often than not, you go with B. Give it back to the man so he can crawl back inside one last time. Now you notice each of these tombs are anywhere from 10 to 12 feet in depth, even though your average Frenchman, when these go up, not impressively tall, an average of about 5'5", ladies average 5'1". No matter how weird any cemetery in the world ever looks to you, remember that the same basic rules true no matter what religion or denomination you're going for. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, we're just trying to get rid of that body. Well, near the head of each of these tombs, there's a shaft that leads into the earth. Take that bag of ashes, throw it down that shaft, and when it hits the dirt, make the joke. About a year after you're dead, New Orleans is well prepared to give you the shaft just one last time. And I designed that silly joke to help you remember what we do with dead bodies. Any questions so far?
They just recently.
Yeah, but those guys who are listed on the marble, those don't include the metal plaques up there either. So that's not necessarily the complete list of people who are in there.
Oh, I see.
Head first, foot first.
Head first. I was unprepared for that question, sir.
For the toe tag.
Yeah.
It's for the toe tags.
Come on through. I told you there's 3 ways. That's just number 1. Number 2 are all these little ones, like the one we're looking at, the private family tombs. Let's leave the tall past these.
That's it right there.
The private family. Oh yeah, there's a little protrusions here and there. And if you get hurt well enough, that's how we get new members. Private family tomb is exactly what it sounds like. Oh, we're coming back to this one, don't you worry. Can't pass by something like that in the tour and not explain it. We're good with that. We're almost done.
Y'all have a good one. Pizza great guys, so. Oh, y'all got the best questions. We explained it.
The private family tomb is what we have right here. All right. First, you negotiate for a little piece of land. You make a foundation. You build a tomb. Now, if you have, sir, behind you, one of these plaques on the ground that read perpetual care, you get a little bit of help from the Catholic Church when it comes to maintenance. If you don't, it's up to you for day-to-day maintenance. Just so you know, these two go up almost exactly the same time, and the difference between the two is that plaque on the ground. All of these tombs are built to fit 1, 2, or 4 people inside at a time. Is the most common, but it's private property. You can basically build almost anything you want as long as you go through church rules. Each of these tombs also have a decorative factor. For example, see that tomb right there with a big little piece of stone in the front entrance? This is weird. Put it on top of a perfectly good working tomb. It's awkward, it's heavy, it's weird to work with. If it ever falls out, I don't know if they can fix it. They have to be pretty crazy expensive. And the only reason they go through all the trouble of putting that on top of a perfectly good tomb is so that the front facade looks just a little bit more like the French Quarter home these folks lived in while alive in New Orleans. In fact, there are those that live their entire lives in New Orleans and never call this a cemetery. It also goes by the nickname of the City of the Dead, the necropolis of New Orleans. Couldn't make your last payment to own your house in real life? Well, at least in the afterlife, we try to put you in your own house.
Does the church let you keep ashes here of cremated people?
You have to. Well, not you have to, but once you put it into that bag, eventually the bag will degenerate.
But that's the dust. I'm talking about if you cremate someone and take the ashes, can you bring it?
You can. Today, as of the 80s. But if you're Catholic, you'll know before that, not so much. After that, the funerary laws of this town are so loose. Put it this way. There's one musician who was very well publicized that he put in his will that when he died, he wanted his long bones to be taken off his body, cleaned, and made into musical instruments. Now, I'm not sure if they'll do it, but this is the one town where you can get that document notarized by the city. Any other town would be like, hey, go away.
So how do you get a plaque? Pay for it?
You don't. Basically, this spot has more people in it than more people want in than the space available in the old gym. We're not making any more space. So there's only one guy who's been able to build in 5 years, and he's a punchline 2 rows over.
But what about the plaque?
What about
How do you get
How
it?
did they get the
the plaque?
perpetual?
You can get a perpetual care plaque put in front of any tomb pre-existing, or even before it exists, you get the plaque put on the foundation by giving the church about $100,000 worth of donations. Nicolas Cage showed off and gave $250,000 for the same thing just because he could. At the same time, it's tax deductible, so he was in trouble with his taxes. All right, y'all. Let's see. Say you had one of these, you have somebody inside in a single occupant dwelling, and before that first year of the day's over, a second person in your family dies. What do you do with that second body before we had electricity? Actually, we had three choices, and I already told you one of them. You can always rent the shelf. This is one aspect of local culture that's hard to communicate, so I hope I do this right. Just like the tiny little French Quarter homes that these emulate, they're barely big enough for what goes on inside on a day-to-day basis. Special event happens, an extra person in the family dies, Mardi Gras, almost the same thing. Well, it's not uncommon for even landlords to rent a little apartment down the street or hotel room for a prolonged period of time, and that's really how they think about it. These are the private homes, those are the rentals. Second option, I know you're thinking of it, yes, you can try to stack one body on top of another, seal it up, fingers crossed, and hope for the best. Science and engineering both say it works. Local tradition and our religion asks you not to try. One body at a time, 366 unmolested days, don't mix the ashes, then stick to the next guy. Your third option sounds like science fiction, that's why I like it so much. Save it for last. You can always put that third body on ice. 132 years before we have electricity, you could put them on the ice. We had chemically made ice coming out of what's now the Provincial Hotel. This would line the back ice room of the dead. Walls and floor completely covered in ice and would keep cadavers fresh for up to a year post-mortem. This would give local masons enough time to build one of these things for you, or just enough time for the recycling process to run its course, and then you don't have to rent the shelf. By the way, that so-called back ice room of the dead is now the jacuzzi room in the first floor suite of a hotel we're going to go to. And one of the best, let me get you against the one of the best things in my job on top of decent pay and great hours is the fact that every once in a while the people staying in that suite happen to be on the ride with us, and the rest of us get to experience, oh my God, he was talking about our room. So let's see what happens. Last but not least, look towards me, but above and beyond. See those big statues behind me? I told you there's three ways in: the rentals, the private family tombs, and then the clubs. These are clubs, society clubs they're called, based on the act of Catholic burial. If you're a member, it's usually because of ethnic background or modern activity, and always by invitation only. For example, the most famous of all is definitely the Virgin Mary up there sitting on top of the Italian Benevolence Association tomb, and we got around over 300 bodies in that one tomb. Over here's my personal favorite, is Pondering Angel on top of the Treme Brass Band Association tomb. About 165 people are in that tomb. That's modern activity. There's other ways in, but these are the cool ones. If you're a member,
Is there